Hey guys! So today I'm going to show you how to make cream cheese Spritz, which are Spritz cookies. They are a special holiday traditional cookie that we make in my family. My grandma taught me this recipe when I was very, very young. I've been making them for the family since high school. They're a fan favorite. They're tiny little cookies. They are have almost a shortbread consistency. They go great with hot chocolate or coffee or any of those things, and I can't imagine Christmas without them. So I wanted to share them with you in my new little holiday prep baking series here. And I'm actually going to bake these today. These store really well, so I'm going to save them. Over the next few days I'm baking different kinds of cookies, and then I will combine all the cookies in tins to give to the family. So I hope you guys enjoy this recipe. If you would like to have a copy of it for yourself, I have posted the recipe in the more info bar below, as well as put a link to my Pinterest where I pinned a copy of the recipe you can print out if you'd like to have it on hand. I hope you guys enjoy. Before baking, I like to pull all of the ingredients out ahead of time to make sure I have everything, and also sometimes baking recipes call for chilled ingredients such as dairy items to be brought to room temperature, which is the case for this recipe. The dry ingredients for this recipe include 2 1/4 cups all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I use kosher salt, and I just like to pour a little bit into a bowl ahead of time so it's easier to measure out instead of running the risk of pouring too much into the measuring spoon. A 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 cup of sugar. The wet ingredients, or dairy ingredients in this case, include 1 cup of butter, which is 2 sticks. I love using Kerrygold Pure Irish butter. I call it my secret weapon in baking. This is at room temperature now, and 1 block of Kerrygold is equal to 2 sticks or 1 cup of butter. 3/8 block of a cream cheese. I like to buy the cream cheese in a brick because the recipe calls for a certain amount of cream cheese, 3/8 block. This cream cheese is 8 ounces. It differentiates each ounce by a special marking on the packaging, so it is easy to cut and have the right amount of cream cheese. 1 egg yolk, unbeaten. I'm using the organic large brown grade A eggs from 365 Organic, and I have 1 already out. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Additionally, you will need assorted toppings, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I use cookie sheets from Williams-Sonoma. I always have out cookie cooling racks as well, so I'm prepared. And you do not use parchment or any mats of any kind for this cookie. You do need a little light greasing, and I will show that later, but I use high heat canola spray oil by Spectrum, and I apply a very, very small amount to the sheet. You'll also need a cookie press because we're making Spritz cookies, and I will demonstrate this later on how I use this, but mine is by Wilson. I believe I bought it at Michael's several years ago, and it comes with all these different press molds to make different shaped cookies. And of course, you need a fun, holiday-themed apron to complete the experience, as well as some festive Christmas music playing in the background. I bake 2 sheets at a time, and I can fit 1 sheet per rack. So I just make sure that the racks aren't on the very top shelf. It's on the second lowest or second highest one, and then 1 below it with room to get in and out. And then I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. I'm going to start by adding my dry ingredients to a bowl, except for the sugar, which will be creamed with the butter and cream cheese later on in the recipe. So first I start with my flour. I need 2 1/2 cups, and I like to just kind of use the side of the bag to make a level cup. I just kind of push it up against the side of the bag, and voila. That's 1, 2, and 1/2. Next, I need a half a teaspoon of salt. Just kind of shake it to get level. And I need a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon. Now I buy my cinnamon from a local spice shop, and it comes in a bag or a jar. I buy a lot at once, so I like the bag. It's also nice to have bagged items like this because you can do the leveling technique on the side of the bag as well. Otherwise, I would just level it, you know, if you're pulling it out of a jar. But having a little extra cinnamon in this case is not a bad thing. Now I'm going to whisk all of the ingredients together to incorporate them. I know I'm done with this whisking when there are no visible clumps of cinnamon anymore. It's just to get everything nice, sifted, and together. And I have a big spoon at the ready for when I add the dry ingredients to the wet ones later on in the recipe. And we'll put this aside and work on the wet ingredients. Next, I'm going to cream the 2 sticks of softened room temperature butter and 3/8 block of room temperature cream cheese together. I'm using a KitchenAid mixer. You can do this with a handheld electric mixer or by hand. My grandma taught me this recipe, and when I was little, we used to make all cookies by hand, and they came out just as good. This just takes some of the work out of it. I'm using the paddle attachment. And mixing first on low, just to get it so it doesn't go out of the bowl, and then I gradually increase the speed to medium-high. After it's mixed for about a minute, I just take a rubber spatula like so. Festive holiday one is always a nice touch. Totally unnecessary though. And just, kind of scrape the bottom, make sure everything is getting fully incorporated and not stuck to the bottom. And then I just run it for another few seconds. Once it starts to look kind of whipped like this, then I know it's ready to add the sugar. Now, the recipe calls for 1 cup of sugar to be incorporated slowly while the mixer is running. So, here's my sugar, and I am just going to pour it in slowly while the mixer's running on medium. Now you can see it's nice and fluffy, and so I'm going to add our 1 unbeaten egg yolk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Again, I'm going to mix, but a little slower this time so as not to splatter. Just about 10 seconds there to make sure they're incorporated, and once again I'm going to scrape with my spatula, just kind of folding up underneath, making sure that all of the ingredients are fully incorporated. Now is when we add the dry ingredients. Now we add these just a little bit at a time, and I stop the mixer between adding. So I'm going to put in 2 heaping spoonfuls to begin, just like so. And then we're going to mix this on low. 2 more. I just wait until it's mostly incorporated before I add more. Last 2, I'm just going to dump the remaining contents of the bowl in. Now this is a very dry recipe to make the Spritz. You know, it has a lot of flour in it. So I think it's about done. I actually will let it sit in the bowl. I'll scrape it all out, but I'll let it sit in the bowl kind of aside for a few minutes to let it dry out even further. I just find it goes through the press and comes out of the press easier if it's just a little bit dry. So let's take it out. It's a little bit on the sticky side, so I gotta work to get it off of the spatula. Off of the paddle attachment. I want to save as much of the batter as possible. And now I just scrape through. You can see it's very kind of thick, sticky batter, but also dry at the same time. It's kind of a paradoxical experience. But sometimes there's some little clumps of flour at the bottom. There isn't today, but you just want to make sure. And you can see the consistency. It's very sticky and almost thick seeming. Now, like I said, I'm going to let this sit on its own for, maybe like 5 minutes or so. 5-10 minutes. Let it kind of dry out just a little bit before I put it in the press and we start pressing our cookies onto the sheets. As I mentioned before, you don't want to have any parchment or anything like that on the sheets because the cookies won't stick and won't come off the press. And you don't want to just spray directly onto the sheets because that won't work either. When you're putting the press on the sheet, the cookie won't stick if it's very slippery. So what I do is I take a little cooking spray and spray just a tiny little bit like that on a paper towel. Just a tiny bit, and then I run this over the sheets, and it just adds just the tiniest bit of grease to the sheets so that the cookies can come off easily after you're done baking, but they also will still stick when you're trying to press them onto the sheets. The press comes with many different shapes to make cookies with, as well as some to make long cookies with. I don't generally use those. I generally use just the flat cookie kind. And I will show you how I load up the press in just a moment, but I also wanted to show you my decorations I have. They're by Wilson. I purchased them at Michael's. You always want to decorate these cookies before baking, otherwise the decorations won't stick. And also some of them, like these little nonpareils, are very difficult to get to stick, so only certain shapes will hold them. And I'll show you what I mean once we get to pressing. So to prepare my first batch, I rotate the presses device so that it's unlocked and can come up like that. So you can see this part, that's what presses it down, and when you move it to the side it locks. And then I unscrew the base, and this is where we'll fill in the cookie dough. So I just use to be honest, I use my hands because it's much easier. I always bake with clean hands, of course, and I take my rings off when baking as well. And I just kind of roll the dough. It doesn't stick to you that much into rounds and push it in. It just goes in easier that way, and you don't end up wasting any by losing it off the sides or anything like that. You can see like so. Push it in and try to remove as much air as possible by pushing it in. But we will move more air after we put the mold in. So I think that's about good. There. Now I'm going to pick a shape, and I always want to start with an easier shape, one that I'm confident is going to work pretty well. This one usually works well. It ends up kind of looking like a poinsettia. So I put that right on top, and it has directions that says this side out, so you know you're doing it right. And then you want to make sure that the area around where the press screws on is completely clean, that there's no cookie dough spilling over onto that, because then it won't close securely. And you really want to make sure it's really nicely closed. Now we'll rotate the press back into the lock position and push with the lever until it locks in. And there it goes. It's already started spitting it out, but I'm going to take that off so we can start from fresh. Now the first ones are always a bit tricky to get going, and sometimes it takes a few. Or if one comes out that I don't like, I just throw it back into the batter bowl and start again with it in the next round. So you kind of have to get a hang with your press and your dough, how many clicks it takes to get your cookies out. For me, it's usually 1.5 clicks. So I click all the way through once and then only part way a second time. And it's actually a rather quick process, and you can fit quite a bit on one sheet because they do not spread in baking. These cookies have no agents in them like baking soda or baking powder that causes them to rise or spread. They do get a tiny bit bigger, but not enough to run into each other. Oop, and see, sometimes you have to start again. And sometimes they don't come out perfectly perfect, but such is life. And I'm going to do this one again because it came out a little bit big. Oh, that one came out big too. And usually I can get about a sheet's worth out of one tube. It depends how many I throw back, if you know what I mean. Yeah, see, that's all I could get. And then to refill it, I just rotate it back so the pointed part's facing away, and pull up, and you can see empty. So this is pretty good for my first sheet. It always is, it takes a little maneuvering, getting used to. Let's put in a new press, a different shape, and refill with dough for the second sheet. So for this one, I'm going to do this shape. Again, make sure this side is out. Make sure the rungs are clean before screwing on the top, and tighten. And then rotate so it's pointing in the same direction as the handle. Click in to lock. And let's give it another go. Now sometimes it starts getting ahead of itself. It'll kind of push itself out. And I just take it off the bottom and start from fresh. And there you have it. Now I'm going to decorate. Now these kinds of cookies shapes can really hold these nonpareils because of all the little ledges they have. So I actually just put some in my hands and sprinkle them on, and that way I don't waste too many. Beware, these will dye your hands. Fortunately, it washes right off. For this sheet, I'm going to do just a sparkling sugar. Again, I like to put it in my hands because that I can control better how much of it goes on the cookies and not waste too much. You don't want to put the cookies in the oven with all of the extra decorations on the sheet because they'll melt to the sheet and make it more difficult to clean up, and it's also kind of wasteful. So what I do is I take a very clean baking sheet with a lip around it, and I just kind of tilt my other cookie sheet over it very gently so I don't lose too many off the sides from jumping around. And kind of go in all the different directions. You don't want to shake it too vigorously or the decorations will come off your cookies, but you want as many of those little decorations off the sheet as possible. That's pretty good. And then what I do, this is very clean, it's not sticky or anything. See, there's all those at the end. I just take a funnel, put it into the container that had those sprinkles in it, and then just funnel them back in. And then you don't waste any. You can do that with the sanding sugar as well. And here I'm just kind of tapping the bottom, just a little bit lightly. The sugar, the extra sugar, as much as possible in a little sheet. Not all of it, but you can get most of it. And it's the same business. So this sticks a little bit more, but if you kind of shake it down, and voila. Nothing to it, so easy, and you don't waste any, and it's, don't have to clean up a bunch of different things all over your counters. So the oven has preheated, and the first batch is ready to go in. I have the cookies on the center of the shelves, and now I'm going to close the door and set the timer. Now I rotate them halfway through, and it takes anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes to cook. So I want to put them in the oven for 5 minutes to start. So the timer's just gone off, and I'd already rotated them. You can tell when they're done when they're slightly brown, just very slightly around the bottom of the cookie. I've put them on the cooling sheets. They're still on the trays. I only let them cool for a few minutes before using a spatula to remove them from the sheets and add them to the cooling racks without the cookie sheets. This is my cookie spatula. I believe I got it at Crate and Barrel a while ago, but you can see it's very thin. So now we're going to check and see if they're ready to come off. Oh, it just comes off real perfect, and you can tell it's done when it's just slightly brown on the bottom. So I really just kind of gently push them off the rack so none of them break. You have to be very gentle with this part because they can stick to the tray if you just grab at them like with your fingers. So I just kind of like to push on them a little bit with this spatula to loosen them and put them on the cooling rack. Now I'll wipe down my tray and repeat the process. I usually make 3 batches at a time, and you just want to make sure that you don't store or serve these cookies until they're completely cool, because they actually taste much better when they're completely cool than when they're warm. And obviously you don't want to store them when they're warm to avoid problems with moisture and that nature. So I probably leave them out for about an hour, and then they're usually ready to be packaged up or eaten. Now that the Spritz have had a chance to cool, I'm going to package them up until I finish baking all of the cookies, because I like to give out tins with a bunch of different kinds of cookies in them. But the great thing about Spritz is they last a really long time. They're similar in nature to a shortbread. They don't get stale very quickly at all. They freeze perfectly. So it's just a couple of days until I'm giving out cookies, and I'm baking a different batch every day. So I'm just going to house these temporarily in these Glad Big Bowl containers. They look like this. These are a holiday print, but and I'll put one of each design, or maybe just two designs in each bowl, because I also like to have them separated by design, so then it's easy for me to make sure everybody gets a few of each different shape of cookie, if that makes sense. So I'm going to wrap these up. Well, that was the whole recipe. You can see the recipe itself is very simple. It doesn't call for that many ingredients. It's pretty easy to put together. The press takes a little practice, and you really just have to be patient with it. Some days it goes better than others. Today I seem to have everything go wrong with my baking, but I tried my best to film it and show you guys how to make the recipe regardless of these small issues, and the cookies came out great as usual. And just for your information, today it was a 9-minute total baking. You kind of have to judge it by your oven and the day. The weather can affect it as well. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, there is a copy of the recipe below, as well as a link to my Pinterest where I have it pinned. And let me know if you guys make these. The cream cheese just adds a really nice flavor to the cookie, and it's a little different from other Spritz that I've tried before. So I hope you guys enjoy, and stay tuned for the next cookie recipe. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye.